One of the biggest problems we have in our housing market is that people can't get rid of all their stuff.
So let's talk about downsizing today and how to make that happen.
Welcome to World's Top Agent. Together, Lorraine Jordan and Sean Provencher have sold nearly $5 billion worth of real estate. They're experts at getting results and making real estate simple for buyers, sellers, and investors. This is World's Top Agent.
Okay, Sean, let's start with why should homeowners consider downsizing and what are the main benefits?
I mean, the first obvious one being that a lot of the time people stay in a larger home longer than they should. So you'll have a family style home, 4 bedrooms, 2,500 square feet, something like that. And you'll have mom and dad who are empty nesters living in a house where they just kind of close doors and don't use entire spaces inside their home anymore because they don't need it. Their kids have moved out.
I've even seen people use the dining room as a bedroom, like you said, and just close off the whole upstairs.
Not having to clean and maintain a larger property than you need is going to make your life better. It's going to be more comfortable.
People will also keep space for the future, right? Oh, the grandkids come in the summer for a couple weeks, so we're going to keep the pool, or Christmas dinner. We need a big dining room. We don't want to downsize because of those reasons.
Spending all this energy and maintaining something that maybe every other year you might not even use because Christmas is going to happen somewhere else. You can always find a space to host a party. It's actually really nice to host a party not in your own house because then, it's a little bit cleaner in terms of start time and finish time and people coming and going. I would say one of the biggest reasons why people should consider a downsize is just waste.
Waste, that's a big word, right? Because the cost, the space, time.
When we have larger homes that were designed for a family and they're only serving 1 or 2 people, as a society, that's really inefficient. And it's actually a big part of the problem of our housing market because what happens is that takes a family home out of the inventory available to families. And so those people who would upgrade into that home often are staying somewhere else or a new piece of inventory needs to be created. And it's really hard to create inventory. You have to build a whole new house. So by downsizing, people are also doing a service to their community by opening that property up to someone who it's better suited for.
Well, and if they open it up and somebody moves up, now that home could be the smaller home that somebody's looking to downsize to. I always find the word downsize kind of a tricky word because it has a little bit of that negative, oh, I'm downsizing, when really I prefer to call it right sizing. What's the right size for our lifestyle today?
Get excited about your new space. You get to reinvent where you're living. Okay, Lorraine, what are the steps people should take when they're planning out their downsize?
I think that it's so important to get excited and understand that this isn't, something negative. This is the next chapter. And how do you want to live in that next chapter? Is it something where you're going to travel a lot? So maybe a condo or an apartment is more convenient because you can just lock it and go and there's other people looking after things. Or is it about being in part of a community and maybe you've been really busy in your career and you haven't really made friends and you're looking for that community of friends that you're going to now spend more time with as you retire and have more time to actually spend with others.
I just love that. And frankly, that could have been a point on our first question too. You really do have the opportunity here to take your lifestyle and reimagine it. So a lot of people, when they're raising their families, they want to do backyard time. They get these big gardens going and those can take a lot of maintenance. Bigger homes can take a lot of maintenance. Just something as simple as clearing the snow on a 4-car driveway could be a big part of what you need to think around and live around in the second half of your life. But maybe that's not what you want to do. Maybe you want to have the ability to turn a key and fly down to Florida. So I think getting excited is a big part, but let's talk about some other steps. What are some of the other things that people should consider and lay out while they're figuring this all out?
A lot to do with cost. What do you want to spend per month? Are you looking at a point where in the next 5 years, perhaps you're going to retire, you're going to be on a different fixed income? What does that look like? And how could you prepare ahead of time for that use?
I think cost is one that a lot of people just kind of look at their first most obvious option and they don't get creative with it either. One thing that we're seeing more people do now is they'll sell their larger home. They might sell for $1.5 million and they'll go find a rental instead of buying. And this is coming from a realtor. I'd way rather sell you something. But if you can get into a purpose-built rental where you're not at risk of the person kicking you out to move back in, and the rent is lower than what the equivalent mortgage would be, and maybe that allows you some flexibility and you don't have to worry about maintenance at all, and it's all just taken care of, that can be a really beautiful way to address things. So it doesn't have to be just a straight shot, sell your home, buy a smaller home. Maybe you sell your home, you put it in some kind of safe investment vehicle, you create some cash flow for yourself, and you might be closer to being able to live the financial style of life that you want to live than you think you are.
I've had a couple of people do something similar, but they actually purchased the triplex or created a fourplex because they were self-employed and they didn't have a retirement income. So now they're making $5,000-$6,000 a month off of rent, which is providing them that income.
Yeah, so get creative with what your options are. There's lots of really smart ways to manage this. The last thing I'd say when it comes to planning, part of your process can be a trial process as well. So if you think that you'd like living in a condo, rent an Airbnb condo for 2 weeks. Go see how it feels. You want to spend 6 months of the year in Florida? Well, why don't you go spend a month in Florida? Try it on for size. It's either going to resonate with you or not, and you'll get more excited about it once you realize that it is or isn't a fit.
And sometimes the other thing that comes into play is health issues. They've had a diagnosis of something and they're looking for something that has accessibility, and they're just planning that way because in that case, it could end up being more of a forced plan. Something that they weren't anticipating and now it's happening. So how do they plan for that?
I think the biggest mistake that people make is they wait until it's too late and then they're like, well, now I have to move. But if you wait that long, chances are you're not going to have a lot of control over your move. You're not going to get to move into that place you're excited about. You might need to have people come and help you and put you in a place where there's assistance and stuff like that. So stay ahead of it. Look at where things are trending and make a decision based on that. You'll probably be able to stay in a space that serves you the way you want longer if you stay ahead of the curve as opposed to waiting until you're forced to do something.
Or I've had people actually maintaining that larger home and it causing, deterioration in health or, because of a fall or something while they were doing the maintenance on the property.
100%.
How can homeowners determine the right size and type of home for their downsized lifestyle?
I think a lot of the time people feel like they need to cart a lot of their stuff with them, and you don't need to. It's one of those processes. I went through this when I relocated where I had to get rid of 80% of my stuff, and it was so hard to get rid of the first 5%, but the next 75% felt like a celebration. Just because you spent a lot of money or spent a lot of time with a certain piece of furniture or something like that, it doesn't mean that you have to spend the rest of your life with it. And even if you can't sell it for what you think it's worth or what you got it for, that's okay. That's just the nature of the world. You've gotten your value from it at this point. Focus on what's best for you, not what you feel is right.
And there's strategies around that. We've helped a lot of people downsize over the years and, taking photos of those, that couch that you've loved forever, those kind of things will help make that work. I've also had people where, I had one lady, she said, my junk is like, this is too much like junk. I have to bring this with me. And I mean, what do you mean you have to bring your junk with you? She goes, well, we donated a lot of stuff, but that was good stuff. This is just junk. I started laughing and I said, okay. And she goes, well, who would want this old, whatever it was, a vase, I think it was. And I said, when you donate something like that, somebody is going to walk into Value Village or wherever it is that you donated, and they're going to see it on the shelf and they're going to go, oh my God, my grandmother used to have a vase like that. And they're going to pick it up and they're going to have this instant memory of being a child and, picking flowers that got put in that vase, and they're going to buy it, they're going to take it home, and you've given them back a memory of their grandmother from you just donating what you're classifying as junk. So, get it out there. It's just like the house. Get it out there and get it recycled and get it reused by somebody and bring someone else some joy.
Generally though, when we're talking about space, less is more a lot of the time. You don't need space to take your stuff with you. I'll give you another one though, stairs. Think about stairs. This is one of the main reasons that we see people needing to move is because they didn't anticipate that they'd have mobility challenges. And mobility challenges are such a common thing as you age. So if you're downsizing as part of your aging process, that's great. Think 10, 15, 20 years down the road, depending on what time it, like what age you are when you're moving in, and think about how many stairs you want to have. We see a lot of people who are mid-60s getting on to 70 and they buy townhouses. And that can work if you're really confident in your knees and hips. Put some foresight into this. You might be better moving into a condo. A lot of people who are like later in their years would like they could choose to live in a main floor condo, so they get a bit of a walkout terrace, or they can access their unit without coming through the building. There's all kinds of options that make this really convenient and just great. But if you don't think about it, you might end up moving again a lot sooner than you really want to.
I also find that people are looking for community, so they want to be in an area where they might have similar neighbors, or they want to be in an area where they can walk to conveniences, or transit is easily accessible, so they can go down to one vehicle.
Not to mention things like healthcare. And you might want to be closer to a city or at least a town where there's going to be some kind of support structure for doctors, pharmacies, hospitals, all that kind of stuff. I personally love the idea. Like, I'm in a suburban area. I'm like, man, once my kids are grown up and I'm done with this kind of like peaceful suburb, I totally might move smack dab in the center of a big city, because that would be so fun to be that pedestrian and have everything right at your fingertips. I'd love that.
The next chapter is, it doesn't need to be, I'm going to move into this little box. It's whatever you want it to be. What has been a dream that you've had, and how have you wanted to live it? And maybe it's time to do that.
What financial considerations should people work through before choosing to downsize?
Well, I always go to affordability. Like, where's your income going to be in 5 years? How have you planned for that? What's that going to be? And we've touched a little bit on that. But the other thing is, in my experience, if you've lived somewhere, 20, 30, 40 years, your biggest concern, because you have equity, is where am I going to go? I'm not selling until I find something. So often you're going to have some additional expenses, because you may decide to buy something before you sell. You may decide to rent something before you sell, because you want to secure that place. So there's going to be that additional cost.
That is a great point. And it kind of goes with that whole dip your toe in the water before you pull the trigger. But also during the process of selling, especially if you're, maybe you're downsizing in your 70s, it's a lot. If you really need to maximize the amount that you sell for, there's going to be a lot of prep and fixing and moving and packing and stuff like that. You're going to be living with minimal personal effects, because homes sell for more when there's less stuff in them. There's going to be people coming and going, doing inspections, walking through. They're going to want to do it on evenings and weekends when buyers aren't at work, right? So it's very disruptive. And if you're able to, and you have the means to do that, like with a little bit of cash, rent something for that period, you'll usually sell for enough more that it offsets the investment, and your life is going to be way better. Okay, but I've got another one as well. So think about the process, think about renting, like you said, but then also just be realistic about the numbers. So if you want to stay in the same area, a lot of the time people are selling like a big 4-bedroom house and they're buying a 2-bedroom something, and they feel like the 2-bedroom should be half the value of the 4-bedroom. So I should get $1 million and a nice new condo. And a lot of the time too, their wish list is something newer with less maintenance. And that is totally not unreasonable, but it's unreasonable to think that it's going to be half the price. Usually when you downsize, you need to take into account that there's friction to just creating any unit of real estate, regardless of the size. So the first chunk of the value is the land, the structure, and whether it's 2 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms, it's not a linear change in price. 2 plus 2 does not equal 4. A 4-bedroom is not going to be that much more valuable than a 2-bedroom. So don't expect to cash out like you won the lottery, because often it doesn't really add out that way.
Yeah, something has to give. Maybe you are moving to a different neighborhood or something along those lines. But yeah, I see the same thing happen often, where they're like, but I have 4 bedrooms and I'm buying something smaller. But there's a bigger demand in the lower priced homes, right? The first time home buyers are after them. Anybody going through maybe a separation, so a single parent is after those. The downsizers or right-sizers are after that. And even people that perhaps bought at a higher price range, with interest rate change, they're looking to buy that less expensive home. So there's more demand on that 2-bedroom.
100%. So just be realistic. And there are people like us who can guide you through this. So just talk to someone who's familiar with your local area, get used to what prices look like, and just start to do the math in advance.
Okay, Sean, what are the emotional aspects of downsizing, and how can they be managed?
It's the memories, right? It's the notches on the door frame from your kids growing up, or we did Christmas here every single year, and they just feel really attached to that. So I'll just be honest, that's a hard one to get around. And at the same time, we talked at the beginning about the idea that you could get excited about what's next. Take the opportunity to write the next chapter in your book. And just because you did one thing for a long time doesn't mean that something different is worse. You don't lose those memories. You just get to create new ones.
For me, there are 3 reasons why people have a hard time downsizing. It's the stuff and what are they going to do with it all. It's people just get comfortable, right? They've been there for a while. Why change things up, even though there's a lot of things that are uncomfortable because of the space, the cost, and everything that's happening. And then third is definitely the memories. I've had people where it could be memories of furniture. I have this huge, beautiful dining room table in my farmhouse that none of my children or grandchildren want because they all like IKEA stuff. So I just can't seem to be able to part with it. So I'm just going to keep living here.
You got to tear one Band-Aid off. And I see a lot of people who would live a better life if they just said, you know what, it's okay, I'm going to move on.
There's also the family part of it. I've also had people where the children have had a meltdown over their parents selling the family home, and there's been a lot of emotion with that. So I always also warn people that once you've made a decision, or if you're starting to make the decision, you need to sit down with family members and have that conversation so that everybody can, get to the same place or the same decision together and at the same amount of time, so that they can absorb it, they can consider it, they can just accept it, I guess.
I know it's kind of an elephant in the room, but I've got to say sometimes greed can really put an ugly mask on people. And sometimes we see family members who would be part of an eventual estate not really caring for their parents in the way that they should, because they have a financial motivation to keeping that home, because it would be better for them if their parents did that instead of spending the money to get the help or the support and the lifestyle that they need. It's really ugly. We see it a ton. And if you're in a position where you have people who are fighting you about what you want to do with your property, just know that this is literally a form of elder abuse, and there are structures in place to help you, and you need to be firm and protect yourself, because a lot of the time we see people who get injured or really just negative stuff happens to them because they were living in a home that they shouldn't have been living in. So own the decision, I think, is an important one when it comes to the emotional side of things. If there are other people who have opinions that might not be in alignment with your safety, your best interest, and all that stuff.
Well, and I think also including, if you're making this decision on your own, sometimes you're looking for that support from family and friends. But I think it's also really bringing them alongside of this excitement in this decision and what you want to do, and just giving them some time to let it digest.
Last question. Who should be involved in my downsize?
Well, we just talked about family and having them involved so that they have some time to understand where you're going and what you're excited about and what's happening. But there's also other information, like occupational therapists, for instance. Great resource to understand what people go through at different stages in life and maybe just preparing for that. Yeah,
we were talking about kind of seeing around the corner. Well, there's people who are professionals in helping you see around the corner. Another one, a family lawyer. Talk to you about your estate. Make sure that, sometimes people do something that seems totally natural financially, but it tees up something worse when the money needs to change hands in the future. So talk to a family lawyer about your estate, and especially if it's of high value, make sure that you're going to be passing anything forward in the most efficient way possible. That's one that I think is really important.
Right, which would bring in your financial planner, an accountant, all of that. Because I've seen people where they've gifted, the family cottage or the family home to children, thinking like, hey, I'll just give you this, without understanding the tax implications.
Okay, well, we've talked a lot about how overwhelming all this stuff can be. And hey, guess what? You don't have to do all this stuff. There's people who professionally, their job is to come in, help you look at all your stuff, decide what stays, what goes. They'll help you sort it between things that can be sold. They'll host an auction. They'll take high value items to be appraised. They'll help you move the stuff you keep into your next home. And I'm talking like they'll set up your internet router, they'll put your toothbrush right where you left it in your last place. It's an amazing set of services that just takes this all off your hands. And people are like, I don't want to spend the money. But you're unlocking hundreds of thousands, if not sometimes millions of dollars of equity. Just treat it as part of the entire process and give yourself permission to do what's right for you. Because if you're later in your years, the right thing for you, I can almost unequivocally guarantee, is not lifting couches and packing boxes of paperwork back and forth.
We walk people through that all the time. And the first step is figuring out, once they know where they're going, is what can we bring with them? And we'll do little drawings that show what furniture. And, we're always, like you said, the toothbrush thing is true. It's how do we make the space still feel like home with their furniture? And don't get me wrong, I also get people that are like, I don't want any of this. I'm buying everything brand new. So we get that too. And it's just understanding that, sharing experiences from other clients and what they've gone through. We often find that people take too much stuff in the beginning. Eventually it's home and they're happy. And, that next chapter can be amazing.
You mentioned maybe there isn't family ready to help you. But also often there is family, but it might not be the right thing for them to be the ones helping you. So, if you're in your 90s, well, your kids might be in their mid 60s to mid 70s, and they also shouldn't be packing all your stuff. I find that people respond better sometimes when they're working with a professional as opposed to a family member.
I think it's also really interesting whenever you say it's easier because maybe your children haven't been through that experience. So having somebody that's been through the experience share their wisdom with you would be helpful. The other thing I want to touch on just to finish things up that I think is funny is when you refer to different age categories, like maybe somebody in that's mid 60s, shouldn't be lifting stuff. And I laugh because I have clients in their late 70s that are better shape than some people in their 30s. So in the end, everything is so specific to you, what your goals are, what your dreams are that maybe you haven't realized yet, and how we can help you make them happen.
Thank you so much for watching, everyone. We covered the tip of the iceberg, but there is so much more when it comes to right sizing and just getting everything in place. It's a big process and you don't need to do it all alone. So reach out to people in your area who can help. And as always, if you have questions and you want to connect with us, there's a link you can use in the description to book some time. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe because it'll mean that we reach more people who enjoy this kind of content and you won't miss anything else we have coming up.
Thanks for watching.